Hi, welcome to this tutorial. My name is Helge Maus from pixeltrain. In this tutorial I want to talk about splines or curves inside of Blender. And if you come from other 3D applications like for example Cinema 4D or Maya, you use splines for modeling purposes and also for animation purposes, and the same is in Blender. Splines or curves are a really big topic, and so I divided the whole topic in separate chunks, and in this first lesson I want to talk about generating curves, working with splines inside of the curves, interpolation types, and how to add stuff, manipulate them, and so on. And in one of the next lessons, we talk about geometry and so on. So let's get started. I first get rid here of this cube here, and we want to add now a curve inside of this Blender interface. So I press the 7 on my numpad to go to the top view. And if you go to your Add menu by pressing Shift A or going here to the menu, you see that we have a whole curves menu. In this menu, we have two separate types of curves. We have the Bezier curves here, Bezier and circle, and we have NURBS curves. And the interesting part is that Blender itself has three different kinds of curves. We can have polylines, which are polyline curves. We have Bezier curves, and we can have NURBS curves, and you can convert them later. So we start here with the simple Bezier here. Let's first take a look here into your outliner and your properties. You see here that we have now a new container, a Bezier curve, and inside of the container there's the Bezier curve here as a node. And the interesting thing is that we have now our own object type. You see that here in the object data properties, that we have now options here for the curves, and these options are really important if we later want to do, for example, geometry, but also if you have more than one spline inside of a curve. So a different kind of object. If you now press the tab key for going into the edit mode, you see that we have our own edit mode with other tools here and also another menu. What you see here is one segment, so we have two control vertices here, which are Bezier controllers, which you know from other applications, like for example Adobe Illustrator and so on. So you can select them by dragging around, you can press the G key for grabbing, and you also can select here these handles, which are separate. So for the beginners in the trainings, it's sometimes a little bit hard to understand that you really have to grab here the handles if you want to change something. And you also can select both handles at the same time, and you can move them at the same time. And also for more than one point, you see here, if I now go to rotate, you rotate these two handles and these two handles at the same time. So it's a little bit different, but you get used to it. Then we have this path here, this segment, and you see that with these arrows, Blender tries to tell us in which direction this path segment now goes. So we have a direction which is important, for example, for building surfaces or also for animating. Let's take a fast look here through the menu. So in the Add menu, we can add more splines to a curve, and the interesting part is, what is a spline here? The whole thing is a curve, so you see this is a container for the curve here. But inside of this container, we can have more splines. Let's add a circle, for example. I move the circle here to the side so that we see both at the same time. And Blender refers now to every of these parts here as a spline. To change now options for a spline, you have to select one point or one control point inside of a spline to get the options. And if you now select this here, for example, and go here to the object data properties and to the active spline here, you now see that these are the options for this thing here. I can demonstrate this with the resolution. If you change the resolution here, only this spline here changes, but not this here. If I select now a point here and change here the options, you see now you only change this here. Also, Blender is able to have its own type for every spline. Interesting concept. So this here is a Bezier circle in the moment, but I want to change it. So I select one of these points, and if you now go to the curves menu, you will see that we have here a set spline type menu. And these are the three types of splines which I told you. We have polygon splines. Let's do something like that. We see these are the same like polygon lines. Then we can have them as Bezier, which we had before, but now I haven't selected a point, so let's do it. It still looks the same, but if you take a closer look here, you see, yeah, now we have handles here and they are vectored. So if you now select all of them, little trick here, Control L selects all the linked path of your selection, or you only press by hovering over a point, the L key. Now I select all these points. And if you now go to the interpolation, which is the V menu here, you can go back here to, let's say, automatic. And then you see, yeah, it's a Bezier again. So this is the Bezier type. And then we have a third part, which is the NURBS curve. And you now see NURBS work a little bit different. You get organic shape and you have a weight on the points and so on. But you see, you can switch these splines here without switching the other splines inside of the same container. A really interesting concept. So let's get rid of this spline here. So I delete all the vertices and then we can select everything here and go back here. Because the first thing normally people want to do is they want to add points or remove points. So let's start with that. So if you want to add or remove points here at the end or the start of the spline, the easy thing is you select this point and then you use a keyboard shortcut which you know from the modeling world, the extrude tool. So you press E like extrude. And now you can add here something. Don't mind about here the tangents, which are now really not so useful. We only want to add a new point here. So pressing the G key moves the point and E extrudes from the selected point. Same thing here. If you select a point at the end and you press the E key, you can extrude from here. And one little trick, if you want to have now a new spline with one point, you can select one of the points which are inside of this spline. So if you select this point here, which is not the end point in one direction, and now you press E, you can move this point around and you see there's no connection here. And then you can press E again to extrude from this point out. After you've drawn something like this, you normally want to select all the points, press the V key again, and you tell now what you want to have. For example, you want to have free tangents or vector tangents or whatever you want to have. And remember that you have to select all the handles which you want to have in this selection. Otherwise, it doesn't work. It only changes the handles which you have selected. This is a really interesting part of Blender, that you can have, for example, here an automatic tangent in this direction. But if you only select now this tangent here, press the V key and say vector, you see that this here is now one type of a tangent and this here is another one. And if you now go here, press the V key again and say I want to have, for example, it automatic. This here is now an automatic one and this here is still the old one. I can change it here to vector again. So different kind of tangents here. And if you select both of them, and then you press the V key and select here automatic. Both are again automatic. So that's the way you work here. So I press the L key here to select all of them, V key and say automatic. And so I get this nice spline here. Okay, we have extruded the spline. For this, we also have a tool, which you find here on the left side, extrude. And this is a really useful tool. So I select it. If you now click a point here, you directly get two widgets. One is this yellow one, which is an extrude in direction of the normal. It's the same like in the polygon world. So if you click the yellow thing and you drag, you only can drag in direction of the normal. You can't leave this normal direction here. That's a feature. Or you can move it freely by going inside of this circle here. You see the circle highlights. And if you now drag, you extrude in the direction which you want. Same here, click here, and then you can add here more points. If you want to add more resolution here inside of a spline. You can select here a segment by selecting the control vertices which define a segment. So this segment here is now selected. And then if you go here, for example, to segments, you can now select here subdivide. And then we have our options menu like you're used to in Blender, and add here more or less points. Let's do that. And now we have a whole bunch of points and we want to get rid of them. You saw that we can delete them by selecting them X key and decide what you want to delete. But what you also can do is you can decimate them. So I select some points here. And another little trick is under the W keyboard shortcut, which is the select tool, there's a circle select, and you have here radius, which you can change. And then you can paint your selection, which you maybe know from Cinema 4D. It's a really useful thing to do. And if you press the W key, you see you toggle through the different selection modes. And then we can go here to the curve, go to cleanup, and here we have a decimate curve. If you select that, we have a ratio, and now we can go up and down to change the ratio here, how many points you want to keep. Same thing is if you have something like that here and the curve looks a little bit jaggy. Let's do something ugly here. Okay, that is good. And now you can select this part here and you go here. Sorry, I lost my selection. I go here now into the control points. We have here a smooth operation. And if you click smooth, you see Blender tries now to smooth out this area here to help you to get this a little bit better. Okay, let's talk about another tool here. Now we have added points here. The next tool is this here, the draw tool. And to start with the draw tool, first take a look into the tools options. You'll find the tools options under properties, but I normally have here my object data properties open. So I press the N key for the N menu, go here to tool, and then we have also the same options. Here we can change the tolerance and what kind of spline I want to draw. We can draw with this tool polygon lines and the Bezier. I decide I want to have a Bezier here, and if you now drag here with the pressed mouse button, you see you now draw this path, and after that we have here an error value which we can change to change the amount of points you want to have, corner angles and so on. You can play with that. I think this is really clear. Okay, now we want to close and open curves. So let's get rid of this one here. I press the L key over one point, X key, and we delete them here. And I draw an easy shape here. So, but I let it open, something like that here. And now I want to close this spline here. There are many ways of doing that. One way would be to select the spline. So I select one point of that, go to the spline options, and then inside of the spline options, if you look through here, active spline, you see here is a cyclic U. And if you click that, you close this spline. Another option would be to press Alt-C, like cyclic. And I think it's somewhere here in the curves menu. Yeah, there it is. Toggle cyclic. And the last thing, which is really useful if you have more than one segment, is you can select these 2 points here and press the F key, like fill in the polygon world. Here it's named make a segment, which does exactly the same thing. We have a segment now here between these 2 points. I undo that to show you something else. You also can have 2 splines connected with that. For example, you have here a spline and here a spline. And this spline goes in this direction. So let's take this point here, which makes more sense. I want to have a connection between this point and this point. So press the F key on your keyboard. And so you make a connection here to connect these 2. And remember, if you want to change direction of this one here, select this, go to segments, switch direction. Now the direction fits, and then I can say F key. And I get something like that here. Great. So I think you now know much more about drawing these splines. I look here through the different options here, which I want to show you. One is splitting here. For example, you want to split now this connection again. what you are able to do is we can select the points which are in the segment which I want. For example, this part here I need for something else. Then we go here to the curve and say split. And now I can grab, and now you have a new segment here. This is one really useful option. If you want to have it in a separate object here, it's the same thing like you know from the polygon world. So press the L key, everything is selected. Go to the curve here and then you select separate and do it. And now we have two curve objects here which are now completely separated. And we can delete this one here because we don't need it anymore. So go out here to object mode and then back into this mode here. And I think that's it for this lesson here. Now you know how to draw splines, how to change the type, and how to work with them. And in the next lesson, we want to dive a little bit deeper in creating geometry with them. My name is Helge Maus from pixeltrain. Have fun.